Welcome back to the Lazy Money Machine podcast, where Graham Brown and myself, Eric ten Have, are dissecting audio that we steal off the internet. At least that's what we're doing today.
Steal.
We're
borrowed.
Stealing it. Okay, we borrowed.
Put it back.
Back steal
we add
borrow.
value to it.
Yeah, add value to it. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we're taking it and trying to, give our spin on it, or at least give our opinion about it. So for today, found a very famous person. We will all know him. Let's listen.
My entire life's been spent only in one industry, which is this one. And but I've been in it now for about 15 years, and I've seen a lot of people make a lot of things. I've seen a lot of people fail a lot of things. And my point of view on this, or my observation, is that the doers are the major thinkers. The people that really create the things that change this industry are both the thinker-doer in one person. And if we really go back and we examine, did Leonardo have a guy off to the side that was thinking 5 years out in the future what he would paint or the technology he would use to paint it? Of course not. Leonardo was the artist, but he also mixed all his own paints. He also was a fairly good chemist, knew about pigments, knew about human anatomy, and combining all of those skills together, the art and the science, the thinking and the doing, was what resulted in the exceptional result. And there is no difference in our industry. The people that have really made the contributions have been the thinkers and the doers. And when you a lot of people, of course, it's very easy to take credit for the thinking. The doing is more concrete, but it's very easy for somebody to say, oh, I thought of this 3 years ago. But usually when you dig a little deeper, you find that the people that really did it were also the people that really worked through the hard intellectual problems as well.
Steve Jobs.
Who was it? I couldn't work it out.
It was Steve Jobs. It was a very early interview that he did. Right. And what I liked about this is something that is really close to my heart as well, which is that I think if you're only the intelligent brain behind either a business or behind, a social interaction, for instance, right? If you're only thinking about things, really very little comes from that. It's only when you combine brilliant thinking with doing that actually it leads to something magical in the case of Apple, right? Products that are really consumer focused, and Steve Jobs was the one that revolutionized the consumer electronics industry. So I thought his view on this is that you have to combine the thinking with the doing, and also probably maybe we can talk about the value of ideas, which is closely related to this. I thought it was a nice starting point. So your views, Graham.
Yeah, so if you look at Steve Jobs as an example, I think there's this myth, isn't he, that he's this kind of genius inventor who just thinks up ideas, which people then go and put to work, right? Yeah, no, let's have a touchpad interface, touch screen, scroll it with your fingers, all that kind of stuff. I think he was... he may take the credit for that, which is what he's talking about. But there was a lot of doing that went on in the background. If you look at his history as well, I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, right? He did a lot of stuff that people don't talk about. I mean, like Next computers, right?
Yes.
That was a big failure. But I mean, that kind of led to the later iterations of Apple, when he came back to Apple. Yeah. So, I mean, I think especially in tech, there is a big mythology or sort of myth around people who just kind of have great ideas, and that's all that kind of is necessary, right? But in reality, no, I don't think ideas are so important at the end of the day. I mean, who was the first ever social network, right? Who was the first ever search engine?
It wasn't Facebook.
And it wasn't Google, right?
It wasn't Google, yeah.
I mean, do you remember before Google we had what?
We had Netscape, Alta Vista.
Lycos, Excite,
yeah.
all those sort of, yeah. So it doesn't matter. Having the idea didn't matter.
Yes.
What matters is execution, right?
Yeah. And also I want to bring this lesson back to what we're teaching on passive income and property investing. I think especially there, the fear of doing, I think, keeps a lot of people away from success. So there's many resources available, paid and unpaid, on how you should do property investing. I mean, we're providing a way for people to learn about this. But in the end, you know, the real learning in doing something new, whether it's a business or something else. Like for me, you know, the last 2 years I've been doing a lot of new things with exercising and health and things like that. If I start doing things, then I start to learn, right? So it's the same with property. Only when I started buying my first property, I started looking at it and, okay, you know, it's not as scary as I thought it might be. And I think by doing, there's a feedback loop I think you're getting when you start to do things that's completely different from analyzing things in your head. When you start to analyze things in your head, you could sort of think, okay, if I do this, then that might happen, and this might happen, and that might happen. But if you actually start executing, then you get feedback from the real world, right? You get feedback from customers, you get feedback from tenants. In the case of my physical exercise, I get feedback from my body. What I'm doing, is it progressing me? Is it helping me? Am I feeling fitter? Do I feel more energy? And that is, I think, where the real learning happens. And I think for Apple, that's the same thing. In their labs, you know, they make thousands and thousands of prototypes, and they make them really working, right? So they get things to the point where they're really working products, and they throw most of those in the trash. So I think that's a real valuable lesson, I think, in combining the thinking with the doing. Have you got experience with this?
Yeah, I mean, every day. I'll talk about property in a minute, but before that, I mean, everybody can relate to learning a language at some point, right? We've all tried. Some of us have been successful. You can't learn a language from a book. You can, but it's pretty ineffective. The best way to learn a language is to start speaking. Go out there, put yourself in situations where you're going to make a fool of yourself, whether that's ordering food in a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
But like you say, feedback from the real world is where we learn, right? That's how we learn. If you think about it, you know, I always point to this example. Who are the most effective language learners? Well, they're kids of about 1 or 2 years old, right? You know, think about it. People learn languages before they can read.
Right.
You know, yeah, most children, if not all children, can speak before they can read a language.
Yes.
You know, you don't need to read. You don't need to read a book. So the human brain is designed to learn and to execute, you know, learn through execution, I should say, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, with my example in property, I remember, I mean, I got into property pretty early, but one of the things I wanted to crack, Eric, is I wanted to crack auctions.
Okay.
Because I just wanted to do it, because I knew that if you really wanted to get bargains, if you really wanted to get good deals, you needed to do auctions.
How did you do that?
Well, the first thing I did was, you know, I looked for the books, and you could go and buy the books, and there's 100 books on how to buy property at auctions, but that was pretty much a waste of time. I thought, well, I'm just going to go to auctions. And I just went to auctions without any intention to buy. I went, I saw, I learned, I met people, I talked to people, I absorbed, and then I decided I'm going to buy at an auction. And I found about a $50,000 house. So you can imagine in the UK what kind of house that is, right?
Mm.
Not much of a house. It didn't have any, you know, when you buy from an auction, I don't know how familiar you are with the process. It's very different from buying from effectively retail high street property sales, you know, agents, right? You go to a place, you don't have an agent, you have a very sketchy detail on the property. Most of the properties can't sell through the high street, so you have to go through auction to sell them. I went to a place which is run down, had no central heating. I don't know, you know, what kind of place this had been before, but it wasn't in good nick. It was on at 50. I got it for 50. I tried to get it cheaper before it hit the auction, but they wouldn't have it. I said to myself, and you've mentioned this before, and I think this is really important for execution and learning. I said to myself, I'm going to buy this thing, even if I just break even.
Right.
Because for me, it was a learning process, right? And I came out, probably after all the effort, I probably came out even after a couple of years, right? But for me, it was a great learning process. I bought the thing, I renovated it, eventually sold it back on. Didn't make much money on it after tax and all that. But for me, what a learning experience.
Yeah.
I could have just been sat there reading a book about auctions.
That's not the same. being in the room is different than reading the book on it. Even following it online, I've seen a lot of auctions online because we've been bidding on properties in auctions while I was here in Indonesia and my partner was in the UK. So he went in with our pre-agreed bid on the different lots that were there, and I watched it online because nowadays you can watch these auctions live on the internet. And then at one time we sold property in auction, and I was in the room, and I thought this is a completely different experience because for me it was like quite a relaxed, calm experience. While I had expected all this hectic bidding and screaming and whatever, it's not like that at all. There's just a bunch of people in the room and they raise their hands or they don't raise their hands and they're buying properties, and there's hundreds of millions of pounds worth of properties being sold in an afternoon. It's unbelievable. So for me also, going there was different than seeing it on the internet. So yeah, it's good you're right. I mean, getting your hands dirty or your feet wet or however you want to call it, just go and do something makes such a difference. And, maybe it comes back to, maybe you can talk a little bit about it because you're doing some work with startups, but especially in this scene of startups whereby I think we need to just shake up all these young millennials and just wake them up and saying, an idea is worth absolutely nothing, unless you can execute and build something with your idea, then you've got a business. But a lot of people think like, oh, I've got an idea, now I'll go and pitch for money. But I don't think it works like that. And I don't think that, that will make for good business. But there's lots and lots of people trying like that. You're in that scene. How do you see that in the new tech startup scenes in Asia or maybe in Europe?
Oh, yeah. It's the same. You talk about young millennials. Maybe that's a little bit unfair to single them out. But, yeah, I think that
well, I'll take the heat for that nasty comment then.
All right. Yeah, but I know what you mean. Especially when you're younger, you have less experience. So you kind of value the idea over anything else.
Yeah.
There's a book called What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20 by Tina Seelig, who happens to be, I think she's an associate professor at Stanford on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
She teaches entrepreneurship courses, which sounds a bit of a contradiction, but she's actually good. And Stanford, of all places, is the most pro-entrepreneurship place in the world, probably. Mm-hmm. And what she has this exercise, which is basically, she says to her students, what's the worst possible business idea that you can come up with, and they brainstorm these business ideas. And I think one of the worst ones they ever came up with was cockroach sushi.
Right.
So somebody came up with it, and she said, "Okay, right, you've come up with the worst possible business idea, which is just fun. It's a bit of fun." But then she turns it on its head and she says to these students, "Right, okay, I've given you a business idea which on the face value is just the worst thing in the world. And you think that's a failure. Out the gate, that business ain't going to work. You can't sell cockroach sushi. Mm-hmm. But what if I said to you, right, I want you to make a business out of this and make it successful? Now flip it on its head. Now what they then say is, well, okay, what if I had to sell cockroach sushi? What if I had the worst idea in the world and I had to make it work? Well, I could, you could have like an experience restaurant, which could be like an adventure for people. That would work, right? People go to Thailand and they eat, scorpions on a stick.
Yes. Yeah, anything on a stick, like basically. Anything fried on a stick. Anything that moves is fried on a stick. In China, too. Right.
Exactly. So you can have any kind of insect on it. But people do it not for the eating pleasure, but for the experience and the bragging rights, share that on Instagram, cockroach sushi. So her point is this, is like you mentioned startups, but I think it's applying to everything, is that there are no bad ideas. So get over it.
Yeah. And it's all in the execution, right? If you pick up the baton, is that what it's called? What you give an estafette? Yeah, so if you pick up, basically if you pick up the baton or pick up the idea, and you run with it and you build it and you put your energy in the execution, I think you have a fair chance of succeeding. But if you dwell on, let me find the best idea in the world, it's never going to happen. You just need to start executing to refine the idea and to improve what you're trying to do, right? I mean, it goes for the both of us as well. I mean, when we decided to go and do a book together, we didn't think that we were doing a weekly or almost daily now podcast talking about interesting topics. It's just by starting to execute that we find our groove and we find our flow and we find a way to make a difference, I think. And that's the same with a business of any sorts. Once you start doing, then you get the feedback from listeners, from market, from clients, from family, from friends, then you hear what people think about it. You can adjust it.
Yeah. Yeah, you make the right point. I think the key point of this conversation is that last bit, isn't it? Is don't get hung up trying to get the right idea, because that is where people get stuck, isn't it? Just start with anything. Start anything. Just get started and make the idea better as you go along.
Absolutely. We'll continue our conversation in the next episode of the Lazy Money Machine podcast. See you soon.